Hello. Happy Sunday. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for giving me a few minutes of your time. If it's Sunday, it's Book Review Sunday, one of my favorite things to do each week. And this week, I picked Charles Duhigg's new book, Supercommunicators. I say new, it came out last year, but Supercommunicators. And I'll tell you right off, first I'll show you a picture of the book. Here's a picture of the cover. Charles has written quite a few books, a couple books. I think I've read them both. You probably have too. He wrote The Power of Habit. And more recently he wrote Smarter, Faster, Better. In fact, I have Smarter, Faster, Better in my digital library, and when I checked to see what my notes were on it, I noticed I was only about 2/3 of the way done, so I have to finish that book. But I saw this book. This book came up as a recommendation maybe in Reuters or Wall Street Journal. It came up somewhere in one of my periodicals, and so I'd love to read this book. So if you know the author, he became somewhat well known for his Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalism. Mostly, I think that was in the New York Times. He has since left the New York Times, and he writes for the New Yorker and the Atlantic, and of course now he writes books. He kind of has a reputation of translating cutting-edge research into practical frameworks that you and I can use. And in his book, he blends storytelling with science to reveal how people and organizations succeed. And that's certainly what he did in his previous two books, and he did in this book. So now I will tell you, this book felt a lot like Never Split the Difference, a book I covered 3 weeks ago with a CIA or FBI negotiator. As a matter of fact, they used some of the same case studies. It was like in the first chapter in both books, almost the same. They used the same example of a CIA agent that was failing until he learned how to have empathy and see things from the other person's point of view. But I actually probably, if I had to force rank them, I like this book, Supercommunicators, over Never Split the Difference. But very similar, and I enjoyed both of them, right? So this book, it's available on hardcover, ebook, audiobook. It's been praised for being deeply relatable and insightful and super rich in stories. It, of course, has full endorsements from top communicators, psychologists, and business leaders. Although I'm reading other people's reviews of this book, it seems that some readers found it a little bit heavy on theory and tools and not as many real-life stories. I found that there's plenty of stories in them. I really actually enjoyed the story. And so the whole purpose of this book is to help readers improve the quality of their conversations by really revealing how best to communicate. And so supercommunicators connect by tuning into the emotional and social layers of the conversation, not just words. And I will tell you throughout the book that one of the main themes is, look, anybody can learn how to be a super communicator. It's a learned skill. It's a skill set. You're not born with it. It's not that you're extroverted and you're a great conversationalist or that you're super sensitive. It's skills that you can learn. So as we start to just talk, I'm gonna just share some of the overall kind of the key theme and some of the key messages, and then I'll just do a quick summary of the book. So as I said, the whole book is communication isn't just about talking; it's about aligning, right? And Charles's key insight is that every meaningful conversation fits into one of three types, meaning that when we have a conversation, we have three types of conversation. And I really like this part of the book, and it's a central theme. And that is, the first type is, what is this really about? But this type, what is this really about, speaks to practical or decision making. Like, you want data, you want facts, you want to make a decision. That's when you say, what is this real conversation about? It means it's a practical conversation. The second one is, how do we feel? And that means it's an emotional conversation. So is our conversation based on our emotions? Is it based on fact? And then there's a third type of conversation that we might have, and that is, who are we? And the who are we is our social or our identity, right? And so one of the things to have a successful conversation, you have to align the types of conversation so that they can be understood and heard. And that's super critical. The book goes over and over. And the first thing is, if you're in conversation with somebody, is recognize which conversation is occurring and then respond accordingly, And so the thing is that You really need to be able to match the type of conversation you're having with your partners. And the thing is, super communicators don't control the conversation. They guide them by listening deeply, asking better questions, and responding with empathy and intention. All right, so I'm going to give you a handful of key points from the book. They're all great. Some of them are like outstanding, by the way. But here's the first one, conversation matching. We've all been told about mirroring and matching. In this book, they want you to mirror and match, but that's just totally surface. To actually fully match is a totally different depth. And I really enjoyed that about this book. So, and I'm about to say this next thing, and we're all going to nod our head because, I'm a specialist about this next thing I'm going to say. Misunderstanding happen when people engage in different types of conversations without realizing it. Alignment is key. And I'll just give you the most typical one. Let's say your wife, you come home from work and your wife is telling about her day and all the problems and blah, blah, blah. I don't mean that, honey, but blah, blah, blah. And what do we want to do? We want to solve it. We want to be practical. Like I immediately go practical. Okay, you had a problem, do this, do this, do this, do this. But she's telling me emotional. She's telling me the emotional part of her day had. And so when I start trying to solve her problems practically, I'm just frustrating her. We're not having a conversation. We're having separate conversations, which only alienates us. And I can tell you, and my wife could tell you, I can be much better at this, honestly. Aligning to have the right conversation is critically important. And so here's the other thing. All meaningful conversations really, in the end, are a learning conversation, is what Charles says, right? Where we get to explore each other's perspective, but not push an outcome. We get to learn, and that's the best conversation we have. And then and I'm going to bring this up at the end, it's a quote too. He has this framework when you enter a conversation. Does a person want to be helped, hugged, or heard? How true is that? Like the example I give my wife. I should ask her, but of course I offend her. I have to ask myself, do you want to be helped? Do you want me to solve this for you? Do you want to be hugged, or you just want to talk it out and want to be heard? And this simple question really sets a tone and reveals what kind of support someone truly needs. So you can ask them, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? That's a great idea, right? And so there's 4 rules for connection. This is back in the key points of the book. The first is identify what conversation is happening. The second is share your goals and ask about theirs in the conversation. Invite feelings and share your own, meaning be real, be authentic, be present. And then always pay attention is identity in play. That's the hardest thing to align to is identity. The easiest is data. The second easiest is emotion. But social and identity is very hard because when someone's talking about who they are or who they see themselves as, all we can do is seek to understand. We don't always have a ton of influence there. And then there's, the next thing is looping for understanding, which is repeat and rephrase. As salespeople, we know this, right? We need to do this so we show that we've heard them and that we're truly listening, and so that we can create trust in our conversation and also supports clarity. And then this next point I really like. This point is so good, and I love this. It was introduced early in the book. Is synchrony is real. And here's what he says. Here's what he says about this. Research shows that during a good conversation, people's breathing, body language, and even their brain waves sync. Super communicators tap into that synchrony intentionally. Isn't that amazing? You've ever had that? Like you're just having a great conversation. You're totally in rhythm in your pace. You've synced with that person. You've synced in all the ways I just said, and you can feel it. And so what the author would say is you can intentionally achieve that if you just learn a few skills and if you pay attention. And here's another thing. The goal of conversations is not agreement. The goal of conversation is understanding. That's the goal of a conversation. So those are the key points. Conversation matching, learning conversations, ask, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? The 4 rules of connection, looping for understanding, synchrony, and the goal is not agreement. So I really like that. Now this book, it was about an 8-hour Audible. And by the way, the author read it himself and did a magnificent job. He was very enjoyable to listen to. He wasn't monotone. I thought he was one of the better authors that read their own book. I really liked it. Like I said, there's enough stories and case studies and examples and then theory. I thought it was a perfect mixture. And I really enjoyed listening to this book. But he starts with the prologue, which he talks about Felix the negotiator. It's amazing how popular it you know, it is. It's like, there's a cottage industry now. If you're a Navy SEAL, when you retire, you can become a public speaker. You can be Jocko, or you can be any number. There's, you could be, well, forget it. You could be any of those guys, right? But now it seems like if you're an FBI, negotiator, you could become a public speaker and you can become a consultant on how to negotiate. So the prologue is about a CIA officer. Oh, no, the prologue is about about an FBI negotiator who exemplified the supercommunication and persuasion, and his success was in listening, mirroring, and making people feel safe. I think that person was mentioned in Never Split the Difference, for sure. The prologue's followed by the first chapter, which is the 3 kinds of conversations, which I've already mentioned to you. And then we get into the main chapters, which is chapter 1, the matching principle. And chapter 1, the matching principle, the author uses CIA officer Jim Lawler as a case study, the real life case study, which is exactly what the author used in Never Split the Difference. It's like I was reading the same chapter, just different book. Really interesting. As a matter of fact, I think that this Jim Lawler has been mentioned in a handful of books. It keeps coming up. And he simply was kind of a hapless, kind of not a successful dude that learned how to be a great, negotiator. Chapter two is every conversation is a negotiation. Really interesting conversation, and it says that every conversation involves an explicit or implicit negotiation. If nothing else, you're negotiating how the conversation is going to work, how it's going to go. Which ones what are you trying to satisfy in that conversation? How are you trying to align? Chapter 3 is the name of the chapter is The Listening Cure. And in this chapter, he talked about this case study about they brought a bunch of hedge fund managers into a seminar for a day to teach them how to listen. It was a really interesting chapter. And it was how quickly they got them to connect, and to really these people that were strangers became, lifelong friends and connected. It was a really good chapter. Chapter 4 was hearing unspoken emotions. Here, this was a very interesting chapter. They used the Big Bang Theory. They showed the Big Bang Theory to explain how unspoken emotions work, because the characters, I guess I've never seen the Big Bang, but the characters of the Big Bang Theory are these emotionally, emotionally challenged people. Like they're pretty reserved, they're geeks, and they don't know how to express their emotions, and so that they can really explore how do you show emotions when you don't show emotions, kind of thing. Chapter 5 is connecting amid conflict. And here they had an example of guns rights and gun control advocates meeting in a room. They didn't change anybody's mind, but they changed how they're listened. And this whole chapter introduced looping and emotional reciprocity. And emotional reciprocity is so important. If you want to have a great conversation, you must have emotional reciprocity, meaning you must offer your authentic you, and you must show up and offer your authentic emotion, and then that forces the person you're talking to reciprocate, and vice versa, and that elevates the conversation. Chapter 6 is social identity conversations. They're the hardest. Topics like race, gender, and politics are often who are we conversations. These run deeper than facts. Connection requires seeing each other's humanity, right? And their humanity may not be your reality, but we have to accept their humanity for what it is. And that's what makes it so hard. Chapter 7 is making the hardest conversations safer. And here he used the Netflix DEI journey. The author showed how to prepare for tough conversations with vulnerability, structure, and care. The chapter really highlighted the difference between persuasion and understanding. And this is the big thing. Like, conversations aren't meant to be manipulated. Conversations are meant for understanding. And if you enter it that way, you'll have a better conversation, right? So I'm going to, just share some notable quotes, things that I thought were notable. Already shared the best one, or one of the best ones. Do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? That's great. And I love that you can ask a person. I'm going to use this device. My wife, honey, hope you don't watch this because you're going to hear this tonight. Honey, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? And I hope I win a gold star. But now here's a great quote. And this actually isn't the author's quote. He's quoting someone else. I forget. It's some old philosopher. But the quote is, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. How true is that? Like the illusion, like I told you something, but did you hear it? Did you understand it? Or you told me something, but was I at all plugged into that? Or did it just go over my head? Or I didn't understand what you're saying? And then the next quote I like is, most conversations fail because we're not having the same one. How true. And then supercommunicators aren't born, they're made. And then finally, looping for understanding turns listening into connection. How true is that? Right? When we're validating somebody and repeating what they're saying and we're giving them the cues that we're listening, that's when communication starts to happen, because there's a connection, and you need a connection to have a conversation, right? So, if I was going to summarize this book, and I like the book, and it was a good listen. Supercommunicators it's more of a book on communication. It's more than a book on communication, I should say. It's almost a guide to emotional intelligence in action. Like, okay, emotional intelligence, let's pretend we have our own awareness, our own emotional intelligence. But when we conversate with somebody, we have to apply our emotional intelligence into that conversation, which is why this book is more teaching you how to take emotional intelligence into action. In this book, you know what? This book, it doesn't matter whether you're a salesperson or a leader, a baseball coach, a husband or a wife, no matter a friend, it doesn't matter who you are. The book can help all of us improve our conversations so we can have the best conversations of our life. So the thing I would just, say or leave with, if you're having a tense or tough conversation, just hit pause and say to yourself, do they need help, a hug, or just to be heard? And you understand that, you'll be a better conversationalist. So that's the book. I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, the author did a great job reading it. It had really good. So I only touched on a couple of case studies. There's one, I think it was chapter 3. I think they were talking about, I don't remember the name, Ernie Peel. It was about a trial where the guy was clearly guilty, and there was a hung jury, and it talked about how certain jury members had influence. I mean, it was repeatedly, it would use these case studies to teach you the different frameworks in the book. It made it super enjoyable. So give it a try. I liked it. Let me know what you think. I appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we're off to a new week tomorrow. Thanks so much. I look forward to talking to you again soon.